Look at the little shaker sitting on your kitchen table. That's salt. You probably don't think about it, you just sprinkle it on your chips and move on with your life. But there was a time when people fought wars over that stuff. There was a time when soldiers got paid in it. There was even a time when it was worth roughly the same as gold, weight for weight. So today, we're asking a simple question. When did humans start eating salt? And why did something this ordinary become one of the most fought over things on the planet? Here's the thing nobody tells you about salt. It's not just a flavor. Your body actually needs it to survive. Most people think salt is just there to make food taste better, the way sugar makes cake taste better. That's not really true. Salt contains something called sodium. Your body uses sodium to keep your nerves firing, your muscles moving, and your heart beating. Every single heartbeat you've ever had involved sodium doing its job. If your sodium levels get too low or too high, it can genuinely kill you. That's not an exaggeration, that's just how the body works. So this isn't really a story about seasoning. It's a story about something your body cannot survive without, and what happened when humans figured that out. Here's what the evidence actually shows. Let's start with our earliest ancestors. Animals like chimpanzees and gorillas eat mostly plants, and plants like fruit and leaves already contain a small amount of sodium. That was enough for them, but early humans changed things. They started hunting more, moving through hot open land, and sweating a lot while doing it. And when you sweat, you lose sodium along with the water. So early humans needed more sodium than their ape ancestors did. Luckily, meat helped with that. Meat contains sodium, so does blood. So eating more meat gave early humans a decent top-up. But here's the real question. Did they actually go looking for salt on its own, or did they just get by on whatever sodium happened to be in their food? We can't know this for certain, because salt doesn't leave clues behind the way stone tools or bones do. If you just eat it, it doesn't fossilize, but there's a strong clue hiding in nature itself. Animals seek out salt on purpose. All over the world, animals travel long distances just to lick natural salty ground, called a salt lick. Deer do it, elephants do it. Basically, any plant-eating animal will make a special trip just for a lick of salty dirt, which is either impressive dedication or extremely low standards, depending on how you look at it. Early humans were excellent at watching animal behavior because their survival depended on it. So it's very likely they noticed animals gathering at these strange, salty spots, got curious, tasted the ground themselves, and thought, that's actually kind of nice. And just like that, salt stopped being random dirt and became something worth seeking out on purpose. Natural salt shows up in a few places. Dried up lake beds in hot, dry regions leave behind salty crusts on the surface. Salt springs bubble up from underground and taste noticeably different from normal water. And people living near the coast had it easiest of all, since seawater, sea spray, and seafood all naturally contain sodium. Now here's a detail that almost never gets mentioned. Some groups of people living deep in rainforests, far from any natural salt, didn't just give up and go without it. In parts of Papua New Guinea, the Amazon, and Central Africa, some communities figured out that burning certain plants and eating the ash gave them sodium too, since the plant had soaked it up from the soil while it was growing. Think about that for a second. These groups had no access to actual salt, so they invented their own version of it out of ash because the need for sodium was strong enough to force that kind of creativity. That's not primitive, that's genuinely clever problem solving with whatever was on hand. The oldest confirmed evidence of humans actually producing salt on purpose comes from a site in Romania, dating back around 8,000 years. People there were boiling naturally salty water to pull out solid salt at scale. And that detail matters, because you don't go through the trouble of boiling water for hours just for fun. If people were doing that much work for salt, it means they genuinely needed more of it than nature was casually handing them. If you want to keep learning weird, overlooked details like this about how ancient humans actually lived, hit subscribe. There's plenty more where this came from. Here's a twist that flips the whole story on its head. Farming, the thing that's supposed to be humanity's big success story, may have actually caused a salt crisis. Hunter-gatherers ate a huge mix of foods, meat, fruit, roots, nuts. All of that variety gave them a decent, if inconsistent, amount of sodium. Then farming showed up, and diets suddenly narrowed down to mostly grain, wheat, rice, corn, and grain barely has any sodium in it at all. So the moment humans switched to farming, they created a gap between how much sodium their bodies needed and how much their new diet actually gave them. That gap didn't shrink. If anything, it grew because farming also let people live closer together in bigger groups, which meant they needed to store food through winter instead of just going out and finding fresh food every day. And this is where salt becomes something else entirely. Not just food, but a preservative. Salted meat lasts far longer than fresh meat. Salted fish doesn't spoil the way fresh fish does. Nobody understood the actual science of why this worked. They just knew that if you rubbed salt on meat, it lasted through winter instead of rotting in a week. So salt quietly became two things at once, something your body genuinely needed and something that let you store food for months. That combination is exactly what turned an ordinary mineral into one of the most powerful substances in the ancient world. Once that happened, civilization after civilization, with zero contact with each other, all came to the exact same conclusion. Salt was worth fighting for. In ancient Rome, soldiers were actually given an allowance specifically for salt. That word eventually became the English word salary. So next time you get paid, you're technically getting a modern, less crunchy version of a salt allowance. The Romans also built entire roads just to move salt from the coast to inland cities. That's how important it was, not a side road, a main road, purely for salt. In China, salt trade routes go back thousands of years. In the Sahara, salt became so valuable that traders swapped it for gold, pound for pound, actual gold for salt. In the Americas, the Maya fought over control of salt pans, and native nations in North America fought over salt springs long before Europeans even arrived. None of these groups had ever met each other, and they all landed on the same idea. Whoever controls the salt controls something people cannot live without. And that made salt an incredibly easy thing to tax because nobody could simply decide to stop eating it. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Since everybody needed salt, no matter what, governments realized they could squeeze people for it, and people had no real choice but to pay. In India, the British government taxed salt heavily, even though ordinary people desperately needed it just to survive. This became so hated that Gandhi chose it as the exact target for his first major protest. In 1930, he walked 240 miles to the sea just to make his own salt and openly break that law. He didn't pick something small or symbolic. He picked the one thing everybody in the country genuinely could not live without. In France, a brutal salt tax, called the gabelle, became one of the most despised policies under the old French monarchy, and it helped fuel the anger that led straight into the French Revolution. Taxing salt wasn't just taxing a seasoning. It was taxing people's ability to preserve their food and survive the winter. That's the uncomfortable part. Something your body simply cannot function without makes an incredibly convenient tool for anyone in power who wants to control a population. So why does any of this matter now? Because that same ancient craving is still sitting inside you today. Your tongue has taste buds specifically built to detect salt, not a general mineral detector, a dedicated salt detector. When you taste something salty, your brain treats it as a reward, in a very similar way to how it treats normal food when you're hungry. That craving evolved for a good reason. Salt used to be genuinely hard to get. Your body developed a system that made you want it, so you wouldn't accidentally run low. The problem is that system was built for a world of salt scarcity, and we now live in a world where salt is sitting in a shaker within arm's reach, all day, every day. The craving hasn't changed even slightly. Only the environment around it has, which is a big part of why so many people today eat far more salt than their bodies actually need, and why doctors keep bringing up blood pressure at every single appointment. So when did early humans start eating salt? Probably hundreds of thousands of years ago, the same casual way they picked up any other useful thing lying around, watching animals, getting curious, tasting the ground, and thinking, oh, that's not bad. For most of that time, it stayed a small extra, since regular food already gave people enough sodium to get by. Everything changed with farming, when grain-heavy diets created a real gap, and the need to store food through winter turned salt into something people couldn't live without. That single shift built roads. It built trade routes stretching across entire continents. It gave us the word salary. It sent one man walking to the sea in protest and it helped spark a revolution. And it all traces back to that plain little shaker sitting on your table right now. Next time you reach for it without even thinking, you're repeating something your ancestors were doing hundreds of thousands of years before anyone ever wrote a single word down. If you enjoyed this one, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what you think we should dig into next.